Mr. John Butler. How are you?
I'm very well, Eric. How the hell are you?
I'm excellent. We were just having a chat before we came on air there about the fact that we've both decided to go for the salt and pepper beard look.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
Are you comfortable with it? Are you happy with it yet?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. I grew it and then I shaved it off quickly. It did start feeling a bit itchy,
Yeah.
and I went to the itchy stage and I thought, I'm just gonna whittle it off. And then I was told by family and nieces and nephews that
Get
it
it
had to.
back.
So
Back.
so I spent the last couple of weeks cultivating it again. So it's a bit of a new image, a new year, a new image, all that kind of stuff.
Quite right. I think it's refreshing. I think it's good for us all. Now, you did you manage to get a holiday before we got locked down?
Yeah, well, look, I've been lucky. Managed to get away the last couple of weeks. So it was a good opportunity to see some friends and family. For us, it was important, particularly because we both have family that were locked away.
Right.
So being able to get a time during the relaxation to actually see people was actually great. So
just clarifying that they weren't actually in prison. They weren't locked away.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
But, no, just for the purposes of restrictions, But no, it was nice, Like my father's 85,
Right.
and he's tough as old boots, but it's always good to have that connection. And then one of the amazing things about sort of lockdown, and it was something I kind of reflect on, is the fact that I started FaceTiming him. FaceTime to start with at all during lockdown, which I never did before. And I reflecting on it afterwards, thought this is something that's always been there. I've always had the opportunity to do, and I never did it. And I felt a bit guilty about not doing that more often, because the facility is there, and it's almost a bit like what we're doing here now with Zoom and Zoom meetings. All this technology was there, but people didn't use it maybe to its maximum extent. And so for me, it was a little bit of a learning. And at 85, he's still well able to master the internet, TV, computers, and FaceTime. So he was happy and delighted with it as well.
Well, he's putting some people half his age to shame then. If he's that adept at what he's doing, that's pretty cool indeed.
It's impressive stuff, but he was always an innovator. That was the thing. So he always likes pushing things and setting up challenges for himself. I think that's what keeps him, so young in mind. So he has his little pet project, and then he'll focus on it. So he ended up wanting to buy a 3D printer for our kids, because during early stages of COVID, he found out, these people, having 3D printers, and they were making face masks. So he said to me one time, "Oh, I'm going to buy the kids a 3D printer." I said, "Oh, okay, right." I said, "Just give them something to do while they're locked down, And I said, "Great, okay, if you want to do that." So and loved it, They've been making.
Well, so they got it. They got it.
Yeah. So so they've ended up making things. I've ended up making stuff as well. I'm going to go off camera slightly.
Oh, I like it.
So I ended up making that, which is basically a simple little tool that you put your phone into. So if I'm having video calls with somebody, then I can have my phone in there, and then you're up and running,
Superb.
So and that was all 3D printer,
So in terms of, okay, offsetting the cost of the actual printer, but in terms of raw materials, how much did that cost you to do?
So that roughly work it out. If you take out the electricity in that, there's about 2.5-3 meters of plastic filament in that, and that probably costs about £2.50.
Crikey! I think I get the feeling, because a few of my friends have got them, and I get the feeling it's the next thing we're all just going to have.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's one of these little things that it becomes it increases its usefulness, and if you can establish the market for that, it's definitely. And the way I look at it, the way I've explained it to people is it's a bit like buying a guitar and then learn to play it. Right, so you start off with other people's music, and then you learn how to play. So basically, what we're doing is using other people's designs for things like this. And then you manufacture something on your 3D printer. The ultimate goal is to basically write your own music or design your own things where you basically use CAD and then you convert the files and then you print them. So we're still learning. It's still stairway to heaven.
I love it. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. But I read an interesting paper, an article really, a few weeks back about some guy was projecting into the future, what might be, and he said, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that when we're looking for small component parts for domestic environment, that we don't buy the thing, we buy the design. And it's just normal. We go on and we just buy the design and we go, I'm making that and I set it off and print it. So fascinating. And you are living proof. You've made a mobile phone stand. That's the equivalent of the second year woodwork project, isn't it?
Yeah, it is basically.
Right. So this probably has a neat segue into what you're doing with your life now. And we're going to come back to transition ignition shortly. Mm-hmm. Because I think you'll be able to clear up a lot of mystery around a particular subject, hopefully. But let's just unpack it a little bit. You grew up in Ireland, clearly, that lovely accent of yours. Grew up in Ireland, yep.
Yeah, so I grew up in a seaside town called Dunmore East in County Waterford. So basically, summers are amazing. There's beaches, yacht clubs, places to go swimming. Winters could be a little bit more depressing because, like everywhere, it's rainy and cold and the nights come early. But it was a great environment to grow up, and always close to the sea. You can see the Hook Lighthouse from our house, and the base of that famous term by hook or by crook. The Hook Lighthouse is one peninsula in the southeast of Ireland, and Crux is a small village on the opposite peninsula. So it's attributed to either Strongbow or Cromwell. But when let's say Cromwell was going to take Waterford, he was going to go up the river, but he had to get one of the fortresses, either at Hook or at Crux. So basically, that's where the term came from. He'll take Waterford by hook or by crook. Basically, either go one way or the other. So I think we can just wrap this up now. That's it. That's gold. Is that it? Thanks very much for coming. we won't get any better than that. That's the last thing I was expected out of that interview.
So the sea and being close to the sea has been through your family's blood and your blood, clearly.
Yeah, because my father's a diver, right. So he worked in salvage diving in the 1950s, and sort of not the sort of saturation diving we talk about now, but very much on the edge of the diving technology at that time, and so he used a classic C.B. Gorman diving suits, the copper hat helmet, like a space suit, so and we've got that at home. So I grew up looking at this stuff, seeing pictures of my father, seeing my father diving, my father talking about being at sea. So, geez, not surprisingly, I ended up at sea myself.
So that was in was Stolt Comex back in the day with you?
So that was Stolt Nielsen. So
Stolt-Nielsen.
I ended up studying in Southampton, and then after completing my diploma, my HND, I joined Stolt Nielsen. So these guys had their chemical tanker company. They did buy into Comex, and that's where the Stolt Comex from the offshore oil and gas aspect came from. But these guys were just totally focused on chemical tankers. That was their initial bread and butter. And they're great because what I worked on was what we call 40, 50,000 gross weight tonnage chemical tankers. So they were big, but they weren't so big that you're stuck at a jetty 100 miles from nowhere. Yeah. So first ship I joined in Antwerp, right in the city. We went to Rotterdam. After that, I never went back to Europe. We ended up in, you could go alongside in Sydney, past Sydney Harbour Bridge, up to Baton Rouge, into New Orleans, up the Amazon, into Buenos Aires, Rio de Janeiro, so it went to all these great places and a great opportunity to see them. So one of the benefits that gave me is after I finished studying, I didn't need a gap year. I didn't need to do that travel year. I was fortunate where I just basically worked for the company where you learned, you earned, and you were able to travel as well. Right. And great life experience.
And what were you doing back in the early days on the ships then?
So I was a marine engineer. So basically, what you're responsible for the machinery space in the engine room. So the first ship I joined, I always remember this. I went joined the ship in Antwerp, and it was what they call a Sol. I'm going to get technical now. A Sulzer RND 90, right? So this is a 6-cylinder Sulzer engine, and the 90 is the size of the piston, so it's 90 centimeters, or 0.9 of a meter. So big unit. And I joined the first day and met the chief engineer, and he said, "Yeah, get a boiler suit on, go down to the engine room. They're changing out one of the pistons." I thought, okay. And then you don't realize that the engine itself goes over, like, so 3 levels in the engine room, and you're going up and down stairs just to get between the stuffing box, the top of the piston, and the bottom of the camshaft. So, like, you end up going down, and I spent the whole day in there, a few breaks after that. I think I went down at 8 o'clock in the morning, came back at 8 or 10 o'clock that night. Coveralls completely full of oil. First engineer looked at me and said, "What do you think your first day?" And I was like, "That was great."
Yeah, give me more. Yeah,
but it was basically the ultimate thing you could do. I think in my time in the Merchant Navy, I think we only changed out 1 or 2 other pistons, so I just happened to hit it on a day where they're doing one of the biggest jobs on the biggest piece of machinery in the engine room. So it was a great, there you go, welcome, you're a marine engineer now,
baptism of fire.
Yeah, but great fun, and that's the thing that from my perspective, it was always about enjoying it and getting stuck in. You'll make mistakes, of course you will. Everybody makes mistakes, but it's about having the intent and the desire to actually want to do something and and participate. You do that, and then mostly people resonate to that.
So most of the people that well, not most of the people that know you, a fair chunk of people, certainly in Aberdeen, will know you from your career. You were with Wood for quite some time. How did you get from doing what you were doing, from those oil-filled coveralls, through to joining the massive organisation that is Wood?
Yeah, so I guess when I was in the Merchant Navy, though I loved it, what I decided is that I didn't want to do it for the rest of my career. I didn't want to retire from the Merchant Navy. And when I left, I was getting to a point where it was getting very tempting. You're going 3 on, 3 off. You'd have a back-to-back engineer, sort of your sort of partner engineer. I thought, I'm going to try and really test my brain cells and see if I can actually get a degree before I get too comfortable in what I'm doing now, and then never do it. So I had applied to go to RGU anyway, and in Aberdeen, and so I came up here. And just basically took a leave of absence from the Merchant Navy in order to do the degree. If it didn't work out, then I always had the backup plan. Always give myself.
So was the plan to come to Aberdeen anyway, or did the degree bring you to Aberdeen and then you took it from there?
Yeah, the degree sort of brought me to Aberdeen, and but it's kind of where I wanted to go anyway. Just I always had this one eye on wanted to go into oil and gas anyway. So if you're going to do that, then we're better to base yourself from an education perspective. And so, like, it's long story short, I completed my degree. I got through it. The brain cells still worked amazingly, and by that point, it really sort of became ingrained in the understanding of what the oil and gas industry was doing in Aberdeen, and really quite enthused by that. So I started off my career in Flexive Sten Offshore, and now known as Technip FMC, and it's great. Their graduate training scheme was phenomenal. It really, over 2 years, you got around all the different departments, so you really became very well, educated and articulate engineer in all different aspects, from the design, construction, installation, and commissioning, and that was brilliant, and worked on great projects. Really started to hone in my project management skills at that point, because it's all about project delivery and project management, understanding customer expectations. So this is different from being in the Merchant Navy, where you're basically you're fixing stuff, you're maintaining stuff, you're operating things. This is slightly different. This is more project based, so where you're looking at deliverables and meeting client expectations. So that was great, and that was something I really kind of enjoyed. I ended up leaving Technip more for family reasons. Myself and my wife decided to move back to Ireland when we were having our kids, And so I worked with Jacobs Engineering, another large engineering firm based in Dublin. And at that point, working with the port of Dublin. And again, another great opportunity to really work with port infrastructure, understand the drivers for ports. Again, I'd been in a lot of ports in the Merchant Navy. I'd mobilized a lot of ships and a lot of ports in Technip. So it was almost like, there was an understanding. I knew, I sort of knew the environment, but I had never worked with the detailed workings of the port environment. So that was really kind of enjoyable. And but then, this kind of call for in the oil and gas industry came back. And so it was initially through a small Irish headquartered company called MCS, who were developers of flexible riser technology, and but have also moved into project management and delivery of umbilical and flexible systems for oil and gas operators. So from a former colleague, I was asked to join MCS, and it was the right time for me. I enjoyed the time that I'd done with Jacobs, but I really was more enthused by working in sort of oil and gas and that day-to-day project delivery, and particularly in sort of areas that I really enjoyed and really understood. So yeah, it was a great opportunity, and I joined MCS, and then I think if I remember the timeline correctly, I think I joined in May, and I think in September, October, basically Wood Group bought MCS, and so then, overnight I became part of the Wood Group organization, and even showing my naivety at the time, I remember at one of the meetings somebody said, "Oh, so does this mean that we, MCS, the entity, are part of JP Kenny?" And I went, "What does that mean?" I was like, "Oh, the Wood Group own JP Kenny." I was like, "Do they?" I was like, so it's all these sort of little things that I began to open up, and I went to understand more. I was like, right.
I guess that was kind of reinforced when the Kenny thing went up behind MCS.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. So what I often said to people is like, during my time at Wood, in the end, we went through God knows how many different business cards and names, so we went from MCS to MCS Kenny, MCS Kenny to Wood Group Kenny, then Wood Group Kenny to Wood Group, and then Wood, so it was quite a journey.
I do reflect back fondly at, I've met some brilliant Irish engineers, and right away when you hear the accent and you hear that they're in flexibles, or you hear that they're in that kind of subsea space, where they started their career, right? That they were just tapped into, and just such brilliant young engineers that have made such a great success of their life and come through that MCS kind of route. I think it was a great institution, well set up.
Yeah. And do you know what? I think it goes down to a lot of companies, like, in that same sort of offshore subsea space, sort of JP Kenny, a lot of the same sort of things, the original Intech for Intech C, Genesis, these are all great companies that kind of came out from this, original sort of entity in sort of subsea engineering and subsea engineering design. And I think there's a great history there, and there's a huge knowledge base there, and I think it's very important to recognize those skills that are in that area and what they can do.
Yeah. So I mean, you were was it 10, 11 years with that Wood when it pulled through?
Yeah, 12 years in total, so it was a long time, definitely the longest part of my career, like, and it gave me, genuinely gave me a great opportunity, because I was able to grow within the company. I was able to see the growth of the company as well, and through the various different acquisitions and how things changed. And I was fortunate to really, sort of have an opportunity to participate in a lot of key aspects of work they're doing, and how the project and the company was changing, and how that resonated with changes in the oil and gas industry, even seeing how things like, sort of the CATS pipeline, the CATS pipeline, if I'm correct, is one of the first pipelines in the UK North Sea, the UKCS, that was taken over by an independent company that wasn't an oil and gas operator. So a transmission company, as opposed to an oil and gas operator. I think that's is a little bit more relevant or a little bit more regular in the Gulf of Mexico in the
Yeah.
US and other places, but in the North Sea it never happened. And it's an interesting aspect because, again, at the time BP were selling the asset. It was a company, like, on team, the company who wants to buy it, but they need somebody to operate it. They're effectively, and that's a really interesting aspect, looking at sort of venture capital and private equity, and then looking at people looking at it from an investment case. And it's one of the things that made me realize that even in an aged basin like the North Sea, there's a lot of life there.
Yeah.
And if private equity and venture capital companies can see benefits there, then that's a reality. These guys don't do these things willy-nilly. It's based on solid evidence. But again, it goes back to that thing. You need that good supply chain and that engineering competency to back up, sort of the private equity, the venture capitalists, to really allow them to see their thing through.
So you carry on with your career at Wood, and you ended up in business acquisition.
Yep.
So looking at all interesting things. The way that we actually met was when you attended on behalf of Wood as business acquisition, one of these Subsea UK Springboard events, where I was one of the people up doing the Dragon's Den pitch, and you were sitting with all the sort of operators and the big boys there, having a look at new innovation and all of that. So I guess from an innovation and industrial evolution perspective, did you start to get a flavour for energy transition then? Was that something that was starting to grow?
Yeah, John, it's a really good point. Because I think doing work with like Subsea UK, and I got involved during the previous downturn with NSRI, sort of, and the guys there when they were looking at different sort of marginal pools, margin developments, and that looked at very much technology. So what that started to do is really hone sort of my interest and drive for innovators, technology developers, and seeing how you can do things differently, and then sometimes recognizing that it's just about doing things the way they used to be done, as opposed to doing anything new, and that was an interesting, aspect for me as well. And but it definitely really focused my ideas on technology and technology drivers. Now, when it comes to energy transition, and I had to double check the date on this. One of the main things, I guess, I've been working with a lot of companies for years in different areas. So, within Wood, sort of I was involved with the original Shell Peterhead carbon capture and storage project, many years ago, which is now effectively been reimagined as the Acorn project with Pale Blue Dot. But around that same time, I was speaking to Pale Blue Dot and the guys there, and you're seeing CCS, CCUS. You're seeing, it was, to be fair, I remember it was Sam Gormsall at Pale Blue Dot, a talk that I saw him give, really first ignited the idea for hydrogen, with myself. And that was a real kind of like, the penny dropping moment. And, but all these things were kind of like, little bits of energy transition before the outside, before it was called energy transition. You had CCUS, you had offshore renewables, you had this idea of hydrogen, what it would be, what it would look like. You had all these different technology providers doing things. And then in May of 2019, Oil and Gas UK did an energy transition conference for over 2 days. And I went along to this both days, and I think Wood was sponsoring it along with a number of the operators. And what really, sort of, just pulled it all together, it crystallized it all for me, was the fact that it was the first time I saw Oil and Gas UK, sort of having a talk, and not talking about wrench time, not talking about production efficiency, not talking about the amount of drilling and the amount of production that's going to be over a year. What they were talking about was climate change, ethical investments, sort of need to do things differently. Greta Thunberg and sort of and that whole Extinction Rebellion sort of undercurrent that was happening, this groundswell, and I kind of went, wow, this is different. This is this is a reality. And of course, underpinned by all this, the Paris Accord, the UK targets for 2035, the sort of the long-term targets for 2050. So, so I guess the other parts were kind of like the little elements of things that are happening all around. But what was kind of underpinning this was the governments that had made, commitments to net zero and reduction of emissions. So this made it become a reality. And it was the first time, I think, really probably in a lot of ways, that people had to recognize and had to understand it. Everything else that was happening was just basically fanning the flames. So, after those 2 days, it was kind of like, my head is like, right, this is a new world. This is different. And what it brilliantly pulled together for me was just basically all of the aspects where energy transition, yes, in an oil and gas context, and this is very important. In an oil and gas context, it's about CCUS, it's about potential for hydrogen, it's about decarbonization, it's about renewables and those hybrid sort of things. But now it had one banner, it had one pitch to all go under, and you could bring them all together. But I guess we'll get on to later on, is what's most important though is recognizing what energy transition is and what it means to different parts of the supply chain and different industries. And I think that's where the challenge currently is at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as if you look back through the annals of time, I mean, we've as a species, we've transitioned through energy a few times, right? So going from water and wind power and horsepower to coal and steam, we've transitioned into using new energy sources to do new things. But for someone who might not be as immersed in this subject as you, to simplify what modern 2020 and beyond energy transition means in an oil and gas context, because I think that's where your sphere of focus is. Can you just unpack it a little bit? Give us the kind of layman term. If you met us in the bar, how would you explain if someone said, well, I'm in retail, what does energy transition mean?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. So I guess energy transition, and okay, if we talk about this in the oil and gas context, really what we're trying to identify is, and this is where, it can become confusing. It's like, it's decarbonizing hydrocarbon. And that kind of, in some respects, that becomes a contradiction in terms. Now, if I play it this way, one of the problems I see in the oil and gas industry at the moment is the same thing that we had when we used to talk about collaboration 4 or 5 years ago. In the industry at the moment, I think what we do is we talk about energy transition as being the answer. And if I was to sort of talk through what I had before, it's like, if energy transition is the answer, what's the question? and that's the part where, sort of, I've been focusing quite a lot, right? Because I think a lot of time what happens is, we go, oh, we're the oil price is down, we're going to turn to energy transition. Oh, the numbers are down, we're in the red, energy transition. It's, you have to understand what you're trying to answer in order to be able to try and create a business out of it. And that's where the challenge comes. If you just basically start using it for the sake of saying words out loud, then you're never going to fully understand it. So a lot of what I ended up doing when it started this year was speaking to a lot of companies and operators, supply chain, to really try and understand from them what energy transition means. And in simple terms, it's basically about removing as much of the emissions from the day-to-day work that you are doing in order, in this context, to produce oil and gas. All right. And so what you want to try and do is decarbonize it. And, I've heard talked about before, so this isn't mine, but the people talk about the 3 Ds of energy transition, which is decarbonize, decentralize, and digitize. All right. So basically it's about using these 3 sort of parameters in order to create efficiencies, minimize costs, and reduce emissions. All right. So in simplistic terms, if you think about a large coal burning power generation plant, right? So first of all, if you want to decarbonize it, right? So you want to stop burning coal. That's, people kind of recognize coal, or whether it be oil and gas, whatever else. You want to try and remove this from the chain. So you look for alternatives. That's like kind of like you're looking at your renewables, so solar, wind, whatever. And then if you can, you look to try and decentralize that. and that's where your hybrids come up. So if you have microgrids, so you think about the islands, sort of whether it be Shetland, Orkneys, Western Isles, these small environments, a lot of wind can create these microgrid infrastructures for themselves, so they're not dependent on a sort of a main large source of energy production. And then you got digitization, right? So again, anything that you can do digitally is going to make you more efficient in simplistic terms. It'll make it faster, it'll make it more efficient, it'll make it easier to communicate, to regulate, to count, to measure, to meter. And so if you can, by using almost these 3Ds, then what you're able to do is decarbonize a lot of aspects of your traditional work that you're trying to do. Now, in oil and gas, we're still working on that. We're still, I think, a little bit of the question phase. We're moving fast now, and we're moving faster in probably sort of Northern Europe than we are in other parts of the world. And so, and you got to remember, energy transition is different depending on where you are in the globe as well. So, from a North Sea oil and gas perspective, we've got a mature basin. So we've got a lot of infrastructure here. We've got a very well evolved supply chain, and we've got some phenomenal and very innovative operators. So there's a great opportunity, and the thing about energy transition is you can't just put a square peg into a round hole. So you're not always going to have the same results by basically doing things differently. So from a supply chain and from an oil and gas operator perspective, you have to think differently, and you have to be disruptive, for want of a better term. You have to throw out the rule book and change your business case at times. And that's why it's interesting to see a lot of what's happening. You look at what Bernard Looney is doing with BP, and I was having a discussion with this recently with somebody. January, I think he came in as CEO. End of January, early February, started talking about energy transition. This is what BP are going to do. And then COVID really hit, and inside oil and gas, inside our oil and gas bubble here, if Bernard Looney had said, right, I'm putting this energy transition stuff on ice for 18 months, we're going to steady the ship, bang, bang, nobody in the oil and gas world would have blinked. Would have said, yeah, it makes sense, right?
Another little firework that's just come up and just fizzled out and popped, and
yeah. Exactly. People outside of oil and gas would have gone, there you go, typical, first sign of trouble, oil and gas, reverse back to form. But tellingly, he didn't. He kept moving with it. And the announcements the last few weeks, it's staggering in oil and gas terms. As an oil and gas company, saying that over the next number of years, you're going to reduce the amount of production that you're going to have. That's your lifeblood. That's the stuff that shareholders buy your into your company for. So having the confidence and having the leadership and the vision, say we're going to not do as much of this because we're going to do more of this, whether it's renewables and looking at solar, looking at sort of alternative fuels, so you get into your hydrogen, and then sort of changing your business case. And for me, that's energy transition, right? It's about, it's changing a way of life. This isn't a crash diet. This is the Atkins diet. This is basically about changing your lifestyle, and whether you want to call it becoming a vegan or doing something different, but it's making something that's continuous and ongoing, and for the long term. Now, and that's tricky, because a lot of times in the supply chain, what we're doing is we basically follow what it is that sort of the operators want to do, and that's good, and you can do that, but it's also dangerous. What you need to be trying to do is looking at ways in which you can support the needs of operators, not now, but maybe in a year or 18 months or 2 years or 5 years time, and developing those skill sets now in order to be able to support them. And so everybody has their part to play in energy transition, but it's up to all parts of the supply chain and the operators to understand what that is and to be able to evolve their business to be able to do that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it was a
So
very interesting question that I asked from sitting at the bar as my, I'm not from retail, but I said I was from retail, and I think he explained it really well. So what you're saying is this is not sticking a wind turbine and a solar panel on a platform and telling everybody we're great because the accommodation is now powered by renewable energy. This is about a fundamental economic and policy change across the board. And using BP as the example, they set up their stall. We're not big BP anymore. We're beyond petroleum. So this is about beyond petroleum, right? This is the benchmark.
yeah, absolutely. And this for me is the exciting part of it. And I think this is what I like, so the idea of the business, and I like the idea of energy transition, because when you begin to unshackle yourself from that, the opportunities are endless.
Yeah.
I think there's some link on LinkedIn, I think, put in, and I was writing something, and I kind of said, like, if energy majors if they want to be energy majors, they can't think like oil majors,
Yeah.
and when you stop doing that, then the opportunities are endless. And that's the thing, because so if you look at it from wire to gas, right, you get the opportunity for this production of green hydrogen. You can use renewable, whether it be wind, floating wind, tidal, floating solar, and you can create electricity. That's great. Now, where we are at the moment, I think sometimes is we sort of go, we'll take that power cable, never going to electrify our platforms. Yay, we've done it. No, we haven't. You've scratched the surface.
Yeah.
What else can you do? So you got wire to gas. You got electrolysis. You can create hydrogen. And people say, oh, well, it's not as efficient. But what hydrogen is phenomenal energy vector, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got a surplus of wind power that's creating this electricity, then you can rather than just like proverbial flaring it like the gas, you can actually use it to create hydrogen. That hydrogen can be stored. So basically that's stored energy now. So basically you want to use that energy at some point in the future, you can basically use it, so people say, oh, well, it might be as efficient. But the point is, if you're only going to waste that electricity anyway, not have anywhere to put it, then this is a means of which to create and store that energy. So there's an example. My other sort of pet, sort of interest is data centers, right? Because I like the analogy, because people talk about big data versus big oil, and COVID again is something that's really exasperated this, right? So we're still here in COVID. We're here for 6 months. What's everybody doing? They're all on the internet. They're all on Netflix. They're all on TikTok. They're all on whatever. All these multimedia devices, which all have cloud storage. And I love the idea of cloud storage. Cloud makes you think there's something that's in the air. You can ghostly, it's not, a cloud is basically data center, which is basically like a large bank of CPUs, big computers that are all in the warehouse. And guess what? They get hot.
Yeah.
They get hot, and they take a huge amount of energy to power them, So here we are in Northern Europe. It's quite cold. That's good for things that are hot. You want to cool things down. You've also got the opportunity for renewable energy. So if you think of from an operator's perspective, it's about how do you change your mindset? How do you change your business case? Do you start to become more of a utility? Can you become a power supplier? If you become a power supplier, can you use that for other things? Can you power data centers? Can you cool data centers? Can you have offshore data centers?
Yeah.
Well, why not? Now you're bringing in the supply chain and your JP Kenneys and your subsea consultants. Well, what does that take? We know we've got I think there's a subsea Google data center somewhere in the North Sea. So okay, so what does that need? What can you do with that? And this is where you start kind of blowing the doors open on it.
Yeah.
And it's about not thinking like oil and gas. It's basically using oil and gas to think differently and using the supply chain that's already there to actually create something that's completely different, but just as useful in the 21st century and more useful in 21st century. Because again, I heard yesterday I was listening to something, start of the 19th century, horse traders didn't see any problems. Horse traders are fine. But sure, we can't see these cars taking over. Horses are everywhere. And the fact is, these things always change. So it's going to be the same with electrical vehicles versus sort of internal combustion. But it's also going to be the same with offshore energy industry. And that's where we're heading now. I think we're on a timeline where where you see oil and gas is not going to be included in a lot of acronyms, both in bodies and also in companies. I think where we're talking about we're the energy industry now. We're in energy companies, we're an energy supply chain, and we're all facilitating that. And oil and gas will be a part of it. That's again the transition thing. It'll always be a part, but it'll be a less important part as time goes on. And it's recognizing that, and then seeing where those growth areas are. That's going to increase in energy consumption, but also energy production. And for a supply chain, and what we are now, a traditional oil and gas supply chain, how do you focus on those areas? So it's kind of like it's diverting your attention a little bit and looking at those things that are still to be created or are being created in the background.
Outstanding. It's we tried to keep these to 30 minutes, but we could talk to you for hours about this.
We've gone over, haven't we?
We have gone over a little bit, but I don't care. Let's make a date as this evolves and continues. Let's make a date to come back and revisit it and see where you're at. But if anybody wants to extend this conversation with you, I'm guessing, we'll tag your LinkedIn profile and people can see what you're doing there. I guess you've got some other means of contact. Have you got a website set up yet for Transition Ignition?
No website, but basically, look, by all means, most of my contact details are on LinkedIn. So you can tell I'm always happy to have a conversation, have a chat, and for me it's about communication and discussion. So I'm more than happy to continue on the conversation with yourself and others.
Oh, it's fantastic. I think this is going to generate a lot of interest, and just the way you explain it, I think it makes it more simple and lets us get our head around what is a complex but should be a simple to understand issue when you break it down like that. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your insight. We will check back in with you at some point and see where we're at. I'll probably wait till there's a major announcement in the news, and maybe you can come back and do some commentary on that. But fascinating, John, absolutely fascinating, and thanks so much for the insight into your life today and what you're doing in energy transition. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Eric.
See you soon.